The coffee had gone cold again. I didn't notice until I lifted the mug to my lips and got nothing but that flat, bitter taste that comes from leaving something too long on the counter. I set it back down, looked out the kitchen window at the oak tree in the backyard, the one my father planted the year I was born, and thought, well, that's fitting. It was my 68th birthday. My son knew. My daughter-in-law knew. I'd mentioned it twice in the past month, not because I was hinting at a party or expecting a card in the mail. I just wanted them to remember I existed. That's all. Just remember I'm here. I sat at that kitchen table for 2 hours, watched the morning light move across the linoleum floor the way it always does in October, slow and golden, like it has nowhere to be. I checked my phone 3 times, then a 4th. Then I stopped counting. At 11:14 in the morning, I sent a text to my son. Just a short one. I told him I was thinking about him, that I hoped everything was going well and that I'd love to hear his voice sometime that day if he had a few minutes. I kept it casual. I kept it easy. I didn't say anything about my birthday because I didn't want him to feel obligated. His name is Conrad. He's 36 years old, and for most of his life I would have called him the best thing I ever did. He didn't respond that day. He didn't call. By 7 in the evening, I'd eaten a frozen lasagna alone at the kitchen table. I'd watched 2 episodes of a documentary about national parks. I'd called my old friend Bert, but he was at his granddaughter's soccer game and had to keep it short. I told him happy to hear it, talk soon, and hung up. I went to bed at 9:30. The text came in at 11:52 that night. I was still awake. I don't sleep well anymore, haven't since my wife passed, and I saw the screen light up on my nightstand. I picked it up, thinking maybe it was Conrad calling late, better late than never. It wasn't a call. It was a message. Dad, we've been doing a lot of thinking and talking. We feel like we need some space right now, some time to focus on our own family and our own life. We'd appreciate it if you didn't reach out for a while. We'll contact you when we're ready. I read it 3 times. Then I set the phone face down on the nightstand, put my hands behind my head, and stared at the ceiling of the bedroom where I'd slept for 31 years. We'll contact you when we're ready. I thought about Conrad at age 7, sobbing in the parking lot of his school because he tripped on the curb and torn his new jeans, and how I'd crouched down and told him jeans can be replaced, but brave boys are rare. I thought about the way he used to run to the garage door the second he heard my truck pulling in, every single evening without fail until he was about 11. I thought about teaching him to drive in an empty church parking lot on a Sunday morning, both of us laughing so hard we could barely breathe when he misjudged the curb. I thought about all of it, lying there in the dark. Then I thought about the last 4 years. Conrad met his wife Lacey in 2019. She's from money, old money, the kind that doesn't talk about money. And from the beginning I could feel the shift happening, gradual and quiet, like a tide going out. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it, tried to tell myself this is just how it is when your kid gets married and builds his own life. I'd been a widower for 6 years by then. I knew how to make peace with a quiet house, but I kept showing up, drove 4 hours every Thanksgiving, sent birthday gifts that were never acknowledged beyond a 2-word text, flew out for their housewarming when they bought the place in Scottsdale, and stayed in a hotel down the road because Lacey said the guest room was being used for her yoga. I bought the groceries for the whole weekend. I fixed the garbage disposal that had been broken for 3 months because Conrad never got around to calling a plumber. I drove back to my hotel each night and told myself this was normal. This is what families do. They're busy people. I retired in 2021 after 40 years in civil engineering. I had a good pension, a solid 401k, a paid-off house in Asheville, North Carolina, and no debt anywhere. My financial advisor, a steady, careful woman named Ms. Pruitt, had been telling me for years that I was in excellent shape. I didn't need to do what I did next. I want to be honest about that. I offered to help Conrad and Lacey buy their house. Not a loan, a gift. $240,000 toward the down payment on a 4-bedroom property in a neighborhood where Lacey had always wanted to live. I told Conrad I wanted to do this. I told him I had more than I needed, that his mother would have wanted him to have a good start, that this was the right thing to do with what I'd spent my life building. He said, "Thank you, Dad. I love you." I believed him. After the house, things got comfortable in a way that I slowly recognized as something else. Conrad started calling me when the HVAC needed replacing, when Lacey's car needed a new transmission, when they wanted to take the kids to Hawaii and the timing was a little tight. I helped every time, not because they asked in the right way or showed the right gratitude. If I'm being honest, they rarely did, but because I told myself this is what fathers do. This is love in its practical form. But here's the thing. Nobody tells you about giving too much. After a while, you stop being a person to the people you're giving to. You become a function. You become the thing that makes problems go away. You become expected. By the time that text arrived on my 68th birthday, I had given Conrad and Lacey roughly $380,000 over 4 years. I don't say that to sound like a martyr. I say it because it matters to what comes next. I lay in bed for another hour after reading that message. Then I got up, went to the kitchen, made a fresh cup of coffee, and sat down at the table where I'd sat alone all day. I thought about what I was going to do. I'm not a dramatic man. I grew up in a small town outside of Roanoke, Virginia, the son of a hardware store owner who believed in handshakes, quiet pride, and never spending money you hadn't earned. I played baseball in high school, went to NC State on a partial scholarship, worked construction summers to cover the rest. I met my wife, Donna, in my junior year. She was studying nursing and had the kind of laugh that made a whole room feel warmer. We were married for 38 years before the cancer took her. I know how to be patient. I know how to sit with something hard, but I also know when something is finished. I called my attorney the next morning. His name is Mr. Okafor, sharp, methodical, not a man who wastes words. And I told him what had happened. He was quiet for a moment on the other end of the line. Then he said, "All right, let's look at what we're working with." What we were working with was this. 3 years prior, at my financial advisor's suggestion, I had placed the majority of my estate into a revocable living trust. The trust held my investment accounts, a rental property I owned in Black Mountain, and a life insurance policy. Conrad was named as primary beneficiary. As the grantor and sole trustee, I retained full authority to amend or revoke the trust at any time. Mr. Okafor laid all of this out on his desk with the calm efficiency of a man who had seen this situation before in various forms. He told me I had 3 main options. He told me to go home and think carefully before I decided anything. I told him I'd done my thinking. We spent the next 2 hours going through it. I revised the beneficiary designations on my retirement accounts and life insurance policy to name 2 charities I'd supported for years, a veterans organization out of Asheville and a scholarship fund at NC State. I amended the trust to redirect the rental property and investment accounts to those same organizations, with a provision for a small bequest to my sister in Roanoke and another to Bert's family, people who had shown up for me without being asked. Then I drafted a letter. Not angry. Not long, 3 paragraphs. I told Conrad that I respected his decision to ask for space. I told him I had taken the time to think seriously about what that request meant and about the nature of our relationship over the past several years. I told him that I had revised my estate plans accordingly and that if he had questions, he was welcome to contact Mr. Okafor's office. I didn't send it by text. I sent it certified mail, return receipt requested. Old-fashioned, yes, but I wanted a record. I wanted him to have to sign for it. The rental property in Black Mountain was occupied by a young couple on a month-to-month lease. I had no plans to change anything there. They were good tenants, paid on time, took care of the place. But the property itself was now in the process of being redirected out of any inheritance Conrad might have expected. About a week later, on a Thursday afternoon, I was raking leaves in the backyard when my phone rang. Conrad. I looked at the screen for a moment, felt the old reflex rise up, the pull toward just answer, just smooth it over, just be the bigger person. And then I declined the call. He called again 4 minutes later. I declined again. Over the next 72 hours, I received 23 calls from Conrad and 11 from a number I didn't recognize, which I later determined was Lacey's mother. There were also 14 text messages. Some were confused, some were demanding, 2 of them were, in their way, almost something like remorse. Though even reading them I could feel the difference between someone who is sorry and someone who is sorry about consequences. I didn't respond to any of them. On the 4th day, Saturday, I drove up to the Blue Ridge Parkway and walked a trail I'd been meaning to do for 2 years. 4 miles out, 4 miles back, through the kind of October color that makes you feel briefly like the world is still good at its core. I stopped at an overlook and ate the sandwich I'd packed and watched a red-tailed hawk work the thermals above the valley below. I didn't think about Conrad the whole time. That surprised me. I'd expected to feel the ache of it more intensely up there. Something about the open space and the quiet, but mostly I just felt the weight of my own boots on the ground, the sting of cold air in my lungs, and something I hadn't felt in a long time, something that felt like myself. There's a version of the story where I tell you that Conrad eventually came to me with genuine humility, and we had a long conversation, and we found our way back to something real. Maybe that story still happens. I don't know yet. What I can tell you is that if it does, it won't be because I chased him there. It won't be because I kept showing up with my wallet open and my need for his approval politely hidden behind generosity. If we find our way back to each other, it'll be as men who tell each other the truth. That's the only version I'm interested in anymore. My father used to say that you can't buy your way into people's hearts. He said it quietly, usually when he was fixing something at his workbench, not looking up. I didn't really understand it when I was young. I thought he was being old-fashioned. I thought love was something you demonstrated through action, through provision, through showing up with resources when someone needed them. I wasn't entirely wrong about that. But I missed something he understood and I didn't, not until now. The provision only means something if the relationship underneath it is honest. Otherwise, you're not building a family, you're just paying rent on an illusion. I'm 68 years old. I have a good house, a good view of the mountains, a pension that covers my needs and then some, and more years behind me than ahead. I have friends I hadn't made enough time for. I have trails I haven't walked. I have a shelf full of books I bought and never opened, and a fly rod I haven't touched since before Donna died, and a pickup truck that still runs clean. I have, it turns out, a life. Conrad knows where I live. He knows my number. He knows that I love him. Not because I told him in that certified letter, but because I spent 36 years showing him in every way a father can. That part isn't in question, and it never will be. But I am done being the one who reaches across the distance. I made one more cup of coffee last Saturday morning and took it out to the back porch and sat in the wooden chair I've had since Donna and I bought this house in 1993. The oak tree my father planted was catching the early light, its leaves almost entirely gold now, holding on before the first hard frost takes them. My phone was inside on the counter. No particular reason to check it. I drank my coffee while it was still hot. That's all. That's everything. I've had a lot of time to sit with what happened. That's one thing about getting older that nobody warns you about. You get very good at sitting with things. You don't have the same urge to fill the silence that you did at 40. You learn to let it settle around you, and eventually it shows you what it's made of. What I have come to understand is that none of this happened suddenly. That's the part that's hardest to say out loud. Conrad didn't become who he became overnight, and I didn't get to where I was, eating a frozen dinner alone on my 68th birthday, waiting for a call that never came, in a single bad decision. It was a long accumulation of small ones, most of them made with the best intentions I had. I gave because I wanted to. I want to be clear about that. Every check I wrote, every problem I solved, every trip I made, I did those things because I loved my son and because I believed, genuinely believed, that love was something you showed through action, through showing up, through making things easier. That belief wasn't wrong exactly, but it was incomplete in a way I couldn't see until I was standing outside of it. Here's what I missed. When you remove every consequence from someone's life, you also remove the thing that builds character, not punishment. I'm not talking about punishment. I'm talking about the quiet, necessary friction of figuring things out on your own, of sitting with a problem until you find your way through it, of earning something and feeling the particular satisfaction that only comes from having earned it. I took that from Conrad without meaning to. I smoothed every road so flat that he never learned how to walk on uneven ground. That's not karma in any mystical sense. It's just cause and effect, playing out the way it always does, patient and indifferent. What you practice, you become. What you're never required to practice, you never develop. I practiced generosity and got good at it. Conrad practiced receiving and got good at that. Neither of us noticed what we were doing until it was already done. The hard part, the part I've turned over more times than I can count, is accepting my share of it. There were moments over those 4 years when something felt off, when a thank you never came, or came too small, or when I could feel that I was being managed rather than loved. I noticed. And I let it go. Every time. Because I didn't want to be the kind of father who kept score. What I understand now is that there's a difference between keeping score and paying attention. I stopped paying attention. That was my failure, and I own it. What I did afterward, the call to Mr. Okafor, the amended trust, the certified letter, wasn't revenge. I want to be honest about that too. It was the first honest thing I'd done in years. It was me finally saying, out loud and in writing, that a relationship has to be real on both sides, or it isn't a relationship at all. It's just an arrangement. I don't know what Conrad will do with all of it. That part isn't mine to control. What I do know is that I woke up the morning after I changed those documents and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. A kind of quiet self-respect. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself. It just sits there in your chest, steady and warm, like the first cup of coffee on a cold morning when you got nowhere you have to be. Donna used to say that the most important thing a person can do is stay honest with themselves, even when, especially when, the honest answer is uncomfortable. She was right about most things. She was right about that. I'm 68 years old. I have good years left. And for the first time in a long time, they feel like mine.